A British lawyer sat in a room for one afternoon, and by the time he stood up, over 1 million people were already sentenced to die. Not because he hated them, not because he wanted blood, but because he was told to be fast. No vote was held. No communities were consulted. No warning was given. A line was drawn on a map by someone who had never seen the land, never met the people, and would never live with the consequences. That line would become one of the deadliest decisions in modern history, because when empires rush, people bleed. Britain was leaving India, and it wanted out quickly. Too quickly. World War II had shattered the empire. Money was gone. Power was fading. Patience was finished. India was no longer controllable, and Britain knew it. But leaving responsibly would take time. Time meant responsibility, and Britain wanted none of it. So they chose speed, and speed became the weapon. India was not one country in reality. It was hundreds of identities layered on top of each other. Religions, languages, histories, and loyalties intertwined over centuries. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs lived as neighbors, rivals, business partners, sometimes enemies, often family. Not peaceful, but not doomed. The tension people later blamed on ancient hatred was something Britain had carefully cultivated for decades. Divide, reward, punish, repeat. Now the divisions were cracking open. Muslim leaders feared permanent subjugation in a Hindu-majority India. Hindu leaders feared the land breaking apart. Sikhs feared becoming irrelevant in a country they had bled for. Britain did not try to slow this down. They did not try to heal it. They tried to finish it. Partition. 2 nations. 1 exit. No plan for the people caught in between. And to make partition real, they needed a line. So they hired Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a man who had never been to India, never studied its cultures, never walked its villages, never heard its languages spoken. He was chosen because he was neutral. Neutral enough to be disposable. Radcliffe was given 5 weeks to do what normally takes years. Draw the border between India and Pakistan. No field visits. No community input. No understanding of how people actually lived. He sat in a closed room with outdated maps and flawed census data, turning human lives into statistics. Pressure poured in from every direction. Political leaders demanded favorable borders. Each side accused the other of manipulation. Each line moved meant millions affected. Radcliffe knew he was unqualified. But speed mattered more than precision, because Britain was already packing its bags. And then the most dangerous decision was made. The border would be kept secret. People celebrated independence without knowing which country they belonged to. Families slept in their homes unaware that by morning, those homes would be on the wrong side of history. Punjab was cut in half. A region where communities had lived together for centuries was split with no mercy. Bengal was divided the same way. The line ignored rivers, ignored railways, ignored reality. It ran through farms, wells, marketplaces, and sometimes straight through homes. And when the line was finally revealed, panic spread faster than truth. People didn't wait to see what would happen. They ran, not because they hated their neighbors, but because fear moves faster than reason. 15 million people began moving at once, the largest mass migration the world had ever seen. Muslims fled toward Pakistan. Hindus and Sikhs fled toward India. Parents grabbed children. Elderly were left behind. Entire villages emptied overnight. And then the killings began. Not organized war. Not armies facing each other. Crowds. Rumors. Revenge fueled by fear. Trains were packed beyond capacity. People clung to rooftops, windows, and doors. Some trains arrived at stations with no survivors inside. Only bodies. Men slaughtered where they Saturday. Women abducted by the tens of thousands. Children vanished into the chaos. British soldiers stayed in their barracks. Local police collapsed or joined the violence. There was no evacuation plan. No protection strategy. No accountability. Because officially, Britain was already gone. By the time the violence slowed, over 1 million people were dead. Killed not by a war, not by an invasion, but by a border. And the border didn't stop killing when the blood dried. It hardened. India and Pakistan were born in trauma. Suspicion replaced trust. Memory replaced evidence. Myths replaced facts. Kashmir was left unresolved, a wound intentionally ignored. War followed. Then another. Then another. Decades later, nuclear weapons entered the equation. All because of a line drawn in a hurry. Radcliffe could not escape what he had done. He refused his payment, burned his notes, never publicly defended his decision. But remorse does not resurrect the dead. The line stayed. The trauma stayed. The hatred stayed. And the empire that caused it faced no trial. This was not destiny. This was not inevitable. This was administrative violence. A decision made in comfort that unleashed suffering on people who had no say. The border worked exactly as intended. Britain left on schedule. Paperwork was completed. Responsibility was avoided. Only the people paid the price. Today, the Radcliffe Line still exists. Invisible to outsiders. Unforgettable to those who lived through it. It is proof that maps are not neutral. That pens can kill. That speed can be deadlier than malice. This was not just the birth of two nations. It was the death of millions. And the world moved on. Because the border held. And history rarely asks who paid for it. The violence eventually slowed, not because wounds healed, but because there was no one left to kill in many places. Burned villages stood silent. Abandoned homes collapsed in the rain. Mass graves went unmarked. And the survivors were told to move on. India and Pakistan were now nations. Officially independent. Unofficially traumatized. The Radcliffe Line hardened into a real border. Barbed wire replaced footpaths. Checkpoints replaced marketplaces. People who once crossed the same road to visit family now needed permission, documents, and luck. Some never crossed again. Governments began writing histories. Each side simplified the story. Each side chose villains that were convenient. Complex responsibility was erased. Because blaming an empire that had already left was useless. It was easier to blame neighbors. In Pakistan, partition became a story of survival. In India, it became a story of betrayal. In between were millions of people whose stories fit nowhere. Refugee camps became permanent cities. Trauma became inheritance. Children grew up hearing fragments. About homes left behind. About trains that never arrived. About sisters who disappeared. Silence did as much damage as violence. And then there was Kashmir, a region left unresolved on purpose. Radcliffe had avoided it. Britain delayed it. Both sides claimed it. What began as uncertainty turned into conflict almost immediately. The First Indo-Pakistani War followed within months. Not over ideology, over a line that had never been finished. That unfinished decision ensured the border would keep killing, just more slowly. Every war hardened the divide. Every ceasefire froze resentment instead of resolving it. And then came 1971. Another war. Another border adjustment. Another mass displacement. This time, millions more fled. Another generation learned what it meant to lose everything without warning. Partition was no longer a moment. It was a process. And processes repeat. By the late 20th century, something changed. Fear became strategic. India and Pakistan both acquired nuclear weapons. Now the line drawn in haste held the power to end millions more lives in minutes. The border that once caused chaos with knives and fire could now do it with buttons and codes. And still, the original decision remained unquestioned. Sir Cyril Radcliffe died quietly. No trial. No interrogation. No public reckoning. He is remembered, when remembered at all, as a footnote. But footnotes can be fatal. The British Empire framed its exit as inevitable, as responsible, as unavoidable. But records show otherwise. Officials knew violence was coming. They received warnings. They discussed delays. They chose not to act, because delay meant cost, and cost meant responsibility. Partition was cheaper, so the line was drawn fast, and history was told slowly. Today, the Radcliffe Line still decides who can visit a grave, who can marry whom, who is suspected, who is searched. It decides which histories are taught, which tragedies are remembered, which losses are denied. The people who suffered most were never asked for permission. They were not consulted when the line was drawn. They were not compensated when it destroyed.
They were simply told to adjust. Borders are often described as necessary, as natural, as stabilizing. But this one proves something uncomfortable. Borders are choices, and choices have consequences. This line was not drawn to protect people. It was drawn to protect an exit strategy. It succeeded. The empire left on time. Files were closed. Ships sailed. The people stayed behind to inherit the aftermath. When we talk about partition today, numbers dominate the conversation. Millions displaced, over 1 million dead. But numbers hide something important. Each digit was a face, a name, a future that never happened, a farmer who never returned to his land, a child who never grew old, a family line that ended quietly on a roadside. This is why the Radcliffe Line matters, not because it was unique, but because it worked. It became a template. Fast borders, foreign pens, local blood. You see echoes of it across the world, in the Middle East, in Africa, in divided cities and frozen conflicts. Lines drawn by people who never planned to stay. And when violence followed, it was called unfortunate, unavoidable, ancient. But it wasn't ancient. It was scheduled. The Radcliffe Line reminds us that history is not just made by wars. It is made by meetings, by deadlines, by decisions made in comfortable rooms far from consequences. And the most dangerous sentence in politics is simple: just make it quick. Because quick decisions don't disappear when the paperwork is done. They live on, in borders, in hatred, in memory, and in the silence of places where entire communities once existed. That is the real legacy of the border drawn in one day. Not just the millions it killed, but the future it permanently broke.